They say weddings bring families together. But that night, all I saw were people playing their parts behind masks of silk and champagne. The chandeliers sparkled. The music played a little too loudly. Everyone was laughing like it was a sitcom. But under the surface, the air was thick with judgment. My in-laws were there, of course. Delora, my mother-in-law, standing like a queen beside the newlyweds. Her husband, Grant, stayed silent as usual. Carter, my husband, stood at her side, nodding, smiling, pretending everything was fine. I was sitting at a round table near the dance floor, holding my champagne flute without sipping. My daughter, Kaya, just 14, sat next to me. Her curls were pinned up, and she wore a lavender dress I had sewn myself. She kept glancing at me, reading my face like she always does. She could see I was holding something in, again. It was Evan's wedding, Carter's younger brother. The golden son, the one who could do no wrong. He was marrying Macy, a woman my in-laws adored from the moment she entered the picture. She fits the family, Delora said once. Classy, educated, well-bred. She never used those words for me. I was introduced to a few guests earlier in the evening, Carter's coworkers, Evan's friends from Yale. Each time someone would say, "And this is Amara, Carter's wife," and they'd smile politely, but I could feel it. The look, the silent question behind their eyes. Her? I had spent 17 years with Carter, raised our daughter, put my nursing career on hold so he could finish law school, attended every family event, holiday, fundraiser, reunion. I never made waves. I thought being quiet was the same as being respected. But that night, everything snapped into focus. Delora raised her glass for a toast. The music lowered just enough for her voice to carry. "To real wives," she said, pausing just long enough to make her target clear. "Women who bring pride to their families. Women who are chosen for a reason, not just in placeholders." A few guests chuckled. A few winced. I looked straight at Carter. He didn't flinch, didn't turn, didn't even blink. He just kept staring ahead at Evan and Macy, like I didn't exist. Kaya's fingers tightened around her fork, her jaw tensed. I touched her hand gently, to calm her. But inside, I was screaming. They had said it before, of course, in whispers, in snide remarks passed like hors d'oeuvres at family gatherings. I was the woman Carter had married before he became someone, the temporary chapter, the starter wife. But tonight they said it out loud, in front of me, in front of our daughter. I was about to get up, to excuse myself quietly, to go somewhere I could breathe. But before I could move, Kaya stood. 14 years old, barely taller than my shoulder, but she stood like a storm ready to hit shore. She looked right at me and said, loud enough for the entire reception to hear, "Mom, should I show them the papers you left in the safe?" The music didn't just pause, it died. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The DJ stared at his laptop like it had betrayed him. My mother-in-law's wine glass lowered slowly. Carter turned his head toward Kaya like someone had slapped him. "What did she say?" someone whispered behind me. Kaya was still standing. Her hand slipped into mine. I saw Delora's eyes narrow, her lips twitch like she wanted to speak, but didn't know what to say. "What papers?" Carter finally asked, his voice low, wary. Kaya looked up at me, waiting. I took a breath. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I just said, "Not here." But it was already too late. The music didn't start again. The laughter didn't return. The room had cracked, and everyone felt it. The weight of the silence wasn't on me anymore. It was on them. And in that moment, for the first time in 17 years, I wasn't the one shrinking in a corner. I was the one holding the room hostage, with nothing but the truth they thought I'd never tell. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time Carter looked at me like I was his whole future. We met during his second year of law school. I was working full-time as a nurse, picking up night shifts to pay off my student loans. He came into the ER one night with a busted wrist from a pickup basketball game. I remember thinking he was cocky, but his eyes softened when he smiled, and I was tired of being alone. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. Fast, but I was in love, and I believed love meant sacrifice. When he said he needed to focus on school, I offered to pick up extra shifts. When we got pregnant with Kaya, I paused my career. Just until Carter finishes the bar, I told myself. But the bar came and went. Then it was, just until he makes partner. Then it was, Kaya needs stability. Years passed like seasons on fast forward, and somewhere in the blur I forgot what it felt like to have my own name. From the beginning, Carter's family made it clear I didn't belong. Delora, my mother-in-law, was polite in public but ruthless behind closed doors. She once told Carter in front of me, "You used to have ambition. Now look, you married for convenience." I laughed it off at the time, told myself she was just bitter, or controlling, or old-fashioned. But the truth settled in slowly, like water through cracks. I started noticing things, family photos that didn't include me, group chats I was never added to, dinners where I'd cook for hours, only to be dismissed as Evan's brother's wife by Delora's friends. They had money. I didn't. They had pedigree, legacy colleges, country clubs, foundations. I had student debt and a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. I was never the kind of woman they imagined for Carter. But Carter used to defend me. In the early years, he'd say things like, "Mom, Amara's smarter than all of us," or "She's the reason I made it through law school." He'd hold my hand when we walked into a room. He'd kiss my forehead when I felt like shrinking. For a while, it felt like we were still a team. But slowly, that changed. When Kaya turned 10, Carter started staying later at work. Not suspiciously late, just enough to make me feel like second place. I asked him once, "Is everything okay?" He said, "I'm just tired, Amara." "You're reading into things again." I wasn't reading into anything. I was reading the signs. We stopped talking unless it was about Kaya. He stopped asking how my day was. I stopped telling him when I cried in the shower. We became polite strangers sharing a mortgage. Still, I stayed. I told myself families have seasons, that I was being dramatic, that if I just waited, things would get better. I didn't stay because I was weak. I stayed because I believed in what we had built, because I loved him, because Kaya needed both her parents. But it's hard to hold on when the other person has already let go. Kaya saw more than I realized. Even when she was small, she'd crawl into bed with me after a family dinner and whisper, "Why is Grandma mean to you?" I'd lie and say, "She just had a hard day." But she knew. Kids always do. By the time she turned 14, Kaya stopped pretending. She saw how Carter dismissed me, how Delora smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. She once said, "If I ever get married, I want it to feel like home, not like I'm just surviving it." That broke me, because that's exactly what I was doing, surviving. And when Evan announced his wedding, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd show a little grace. Maybe they'd remember I was family too. But from the moment the invitations were sent, I felt the message loud and clear. You are not one of us. They asked me to wear a specific color to match the family palette, then handed out completely different color schemes to everyone else. They excluded me from the rehearsal dinner seating chart. At the venue walk-through, Macy asked me if I was the caterer's assistant. Still, I smiled. Still, I showed up. Still, I told myself, "You're doing this for Kaya." But in my chest, something was breaking. Quietly, slowly. That wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was a performance. And I was the only one in the room who didn't get a script. I didn't think the word placeholder would haunt me. But once Delora said it out loud, it was all I could hear, even when no one was speaking. It was the night of the wedding rehearsal dinner, held at a historic inn about 45 minutes outside the city. The kind of place with string lights in the trees and tiny bowls of sea salt on every linen-draped table. The Lee family liked things that looked expensive, especially if they could use it to look generous. The room was full of laughter. Evan and Macy beamed like Instagram royalty. Their friends sipped wine and toasted with inside jokes. I sat near the back with Kaya, feeling like the +1 to my own life. Carter hadn't sat with us. He was at the head table with Evan and Delora, flashing that rehearsed smile he always wore at family events. I watched him lean in and whisper something to his mother. She laughed, touched his arm. Then I heard it. Delora, smiling at Macy, said loud enough for the table and the surrounding tables to hear, "You know what I love most about you? You're not just a placeholder. You're a real wife." A few heads turned. Some people chuckled nervously. Others avoided my eyes. I didn't flinch, didn't look away. I just stared at Carter. He heard it. He knew she was talking about me, And he said nothing, not a word, not even a glance my way. That silence? It was louder than the insult. Kaya sat still beside me. Her hands were in her lap, fists clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. She leaned closer and whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded. She wasn't convinced. Why didn't Dad say something? I had no answer. Not one that made sense. Not one that wouldn't break her heart. I could have made a scene. I could have stood up and told everyone what Delora was, what Carter had become. But I didn't. I smiled. I swallowed the hurt like I had so many times before, because that's what I was taught to do. Keep the peace. Be the bigger person. Endure for the sake of the child. But there's a limit to how many times you can betray yourself before something inside you goes numb. That night, as we drove back from the rehearsal dinner, the car was silent. Carter didn't say a word about what happened. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't even acknowledge it. Kaya sat in the back, earphones in, staring out the window. When we got home, I took off my dress, hung it neatly, and walked into the closet we shared. I sat down on the carpeted floor and cried for the first time in months. Not because of Delora. She had always hated me, but because of Carter. Because after all these years, he didn't even pretend to care. Later that night, I overheard him on the phone. I was walking past the office when I heard his voice, low and serious. "No, Mom, she doesn't know. She wouldn't do anything anyway. She's not that kind of woman." I froze. Then Delora's voice, soft, smug, through the speakerphone. "Well, she better stay that way. Macy's everything this family needs. Amara was always just an interim." And Carter said nothing. Again. That was the moment something shifted in me. I had spent 17 years holding this family together, smoothing edges, biting my tongue, showing up even when I wasn't wanted, and now I was being erased. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was hollow. I sat on the edge of our bed that night, Kaya asleep down the hall, and thought about the years I gave, the birthdays I planned, the emergencies I managed, the job I gave up, the woman I used to be before all of this, and I thought, if I disappeared tomorrow, would they even notice? But someone did notice. Kaya. The next morning, she handed me a drawing she made. Us, holding hands in a field of wildflowers. Above it, she'd written in marker, "Mom, you are not a placeholder. You're my home." That did something to me. Woke something up. That was the day I decided if no one else would see my worth, I'd remind them. Not with screaming, not with scenes, with the truth they thought I'd never dare to show. After that night, I stopped hoping Carter would come back to me. I stopped waiting for Delora to respect me. Stopped trying to fit in with a family that only ever saw me as a placeholder. Something inside me hardened. Not bitterness, not rage, just clarity. For the first time in 17 years, I could see things exactly as they were. Not how I wanted them to be. And with that came a decision, a quiet, careful one. I was going to leave. Not dramatically, not with slammed doors or explosive fights. I wasn't interested in giving them the performance they were expecting. No, I was going to do it my way, with control, with dignity, and with evidence. Because the truth is, I'd been documenting things for a while. The forgotten tax filings, the joint accounts I was mysteriously removed from, the emails Carter never meant for me to see. Some emotional, some financial, all pointing to a man preparing for a version of life that didn't include me. I hadn't said anything when I found them. At first, because I didn't want to believe it. Later, because I needed time. Time to gather my pieces. I'd made copies of everything. I kept them in a fireproof envelope tucked behind some old documents in the safe. Marriage certificates, insurance policies, statements with Carter's name and hidden accounts, notes I'd written after some of our more painful conversations. Dates, times, quotes. It was a record. A story told in paper and ink. A story I had spent too long pretending didn't exist. I never intended for Kaya to know about any of it. But one afternoon, about a week before the wedding, she walked into the bedroom as I was reviewing some files. I jumped a little, closed the folder, but it was too late. She saw. "Mom," she said, eyes wide, "what is all that?" I hesitated. Then for once, I told her the truth. "They're just papers," I said. "Things I kept, just in case." In case of what? In case the day ever came when I needed to protect myself. She didn't ask more, but she didn't walk away either. She sat on the edge of the bed, silent for a moment, then said, "Is that what you've been doing all these years? Protecting yourself?" "No," I said. "I was protecting you." Her voice cracked when she replied, "I never asked you to stay where you're not loved." And just like that, the final thread that had kept me tethered to Carter snapped. I knew what I had to do. That night, after Kaya went to bed, I pulled out the envelope and added one more thing: a letter. Handwritten, sealed. It was for Kaya. Not to explain the past, she already understood more than a child should, but to give her permission to let go of it. Know that what happened in that house, in that marriage, was never her fault. I placed it back in the safe and locked it. I didn't have a plan for when to use the papers. I imagined leaving after the wedding, quietly on a Sunday, maybe while Carter was at the gym. I thought I'd book a hotel for a few days, file for separation, and send everything through a lawyer. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted freedom, peace, a future where I could breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder. But Kaya, she had other plans. The week of the wedding, I noticed she was watching everything more closely. She followed me from room to room like she was waiting for something, and I realized she was afraid I'd leave without her, that I'd vanish like the woman I used to be, so I promised her, no matter what happens, we leave together, understand? She nodded, then said something that stopped me cold. Good, because if they say one more thing about you, I'm going to tell the whole room what you're keeping in that safe. I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone braver than I had ever been. "Don't do that," I said quietly. "Why not?" she asked. "Because I want you to have a childhood, not a war." She shook her head. "Then maybe it's time someone fought back for you." And that's when I knew. I wasn't in this alone anymore. My daughter wasn't just watching. She was ready to speak. And the next time they tried to humiliate me in public, I wasn't going to stop her. Weddings are supposed to feel like a celebration. Laughter, music, dancing, love in the air. But that reception felt like a stage performance, and I was the unwanted extra. The invisible woman in a dress chosen to blend in, not stand out. It was Evan and Macy's big day, but it might as well have been another Lee family showcase. Flawless decor, curated guests, designer gowns, and enough surface-level charm to make it all look effortless. I sat at table 14 with Kaya. Our table was the farthest from the head table, practically behind a pillar. It was a quiet punishment I'd learned to recognize, polite on paper, but purposeful in practice. Carter didn't sit with us. Of course he didn't. He was standing next to his mother at the main table, chatting with guests like everything was perfect. He wore that expensive navy suit I had tailored for him 3 years ago, the one I paid for back when he said we couldn't afford luxuries for me. Funny how money always found its way to him, but never through me. The music had just faded out as Dolores stood to give her toast. All eyes turned toward her. She clinked her glass and smiled like royalty. "I'd like to toast the bride," she began, lifting her champagne. "Macy, you are grace. You are style. You are the very definition of what it means to be a real wife in this family." That word again. Real. There was a beat. Just a pause, but the tension was thick. Then she added with a smug little laugh, "Some women wear rings, others earn them." The guests chuckled, some politely, some nervously. A few looked over at me. I stayed still, not because I wasn't angry, because I'd already decided they weren't going to break me in public. Carter didn't look at me. He laughed, then took a sip of his drink, and that's when Kaya stood up. No warning, no hesitation. She rose from her chair and said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "Mom, should I show them the papers you left in the safe?" The moment froze. Music stopped. Forks paused mid-bite. Conversations cut mid-word. You could feel the shift, like someone had shut off the oxygen in the room. Dolores' glass halted halfway to her lips. Her eyes locked onto Kaya, and for the first time, I saw her afraid. Carter's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice tight. Kaya didn't flinch. She looked straight ahead, like she was reading from her heart. "I think everyone here should know what this family really is. how they treat the person who's been here the longest, the woman who gave up everything for them. Some guests gasped. Others stared, wide-eyed. "Kaya," I said gently, "sit down." But she didn't. "Do you want me to tell them about the bank accounts?" she asked. "The ones he opened behind your back? Or the way Grandma says you were never good enough, even though you raised me on your own while Dad chased his perfect image?" "Enough," Carter said, rising from his chair. "No," I said quietly, rising with him. "Let her speak." Delora stood next, trying to regain control. "She's a child. She doesn't understand." "She understands perfectly," I said, my voice calm. "She's been watching her whole life." I reached out and held Kaya's hand. Then I looked around the room, the family, friends, the lawyers, the women who had always ignored me, and I said, "I kept the papers in a safe because I knew someday the truth would matter. Maybe not to you, but to her." Carter was pale. Delora looked like she'd swallowed glass. Macy shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Evan, who was stone-faced. We didn't need to show them anything that night. We didn't need to open the envelope or flash documents. The silence said enough. The fear in their eyes said more. Kaya slowly sat back down, and I followed. The music never resumed. No one toasted again. No one asked us to leave, but they didn't need to. We had already exited the story they wrote for us. From that moment on, they would never be able to pretend I didn't matter. Because in front of everyone, my daughter reminded them, I wasn't a placeholder. I was the woman they underestimated, and the mother they could never erase. We didn't wait for dessert. Kaya and I left the wedding reception with nothing but our dignity and each other. I remember the feel of her hand in mine, small, warm, unshaken. The hallway outside the ballroom echoed with silence. I didn't look back, neither did she. We drove home without speaking for most of the ride, just the sound of tires on pavement and the occasional song from the radio filling the silence. It wasn't an awkward quiet. It was peaceful, the kind of stillness you get after finally exhaling the truth you've been holding in for years. Kaya leaned her head against the window, and after a while she said, "You're not going back to him, are you?" "No," I said. "I'm not." And I meant it. Fully. Finally. Without fear. The next morning, I woke up early, packed 2 suitcases, and called my sister Rhea, who had offered me a place months ago. I had always turned her down, telling her I wasn't ready. But that morning, I was more than ready. I was done. Carter called once. Just once. It was a short voicemail. "Amara, I don't know what you're trying to do, but involving Kaya like that was low. We need to talk." I didn't call him back. I forwarded everything to my attorney, including the documents I had stored in the safe. Within a week, I filed for separation. Delora tried to reach out too. She emailed me, not to apologize, but to say, "It's unfortunate things had to play out in public. I hope you'll consider the impact on Carter's career before making any rash decisions." I laughed when I read it. She still thought this was about appearances. What she didn't understand was that I'd already sacrificed enough of myself for their reputation. Kaya and I moved in with Rhea temporarily. Her little house was cramped, but it felt like a sanctuary. I slept on the pull-out couch and felt more peace than I ever had in the king-sized bed I shared with Carter. Kaya flourished. Her laughter returned. She started painting again, something she stopped doing a year ago. One night, she showed me a new piece she had made. A woman walking barefoot across a field, holding a torch in one hand and a child's hand in the other. "I call it Not Burned, Just Brighter," she said. That painting hangs above my desk now. I started writing too. At first, just journaling. Then one day I posted something online about emotional neglect and identity loss in long-term relationships. I didn't think anyone would read it, but they did. Within days, messages started coming in, from women, from mothers, from people who said, I thought I was the only one. So I kept writing. Started a blog called Not a Placeholder, and within 6 months, it had thousands of subscribers. I shared pieces of my story, not to shame Carter or his family, but to remind other women, silence isn't strength. Endurance isn't love. You can reclaim yourself, even after years of disappearing for someone else's comfort. Carter never really fought the separation. He knew better. I think a part of him believed I'd always come back, that I'd be too scared to start over. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was free. The divorce finalized a year later, quietly, cleanly. I took what was mine and walked away from what never truly belonged to me. I don't wear my wedding ring anymore, but I wear a small necklace Kaya gave me on Mother's Day. It's a simple silver charm engraved with one word, enough. Because I am. Not just for Kaya, not just as a mother, but as a woman, a whole person, not a role, not a filler, not a placeholder. Now every time I see a woman doubt her worth, shrink herself to keep the peace, second-guess her voice, I tell her what Kaya told me. You were never the extra in their story. You were always the author of your own. And the moment you realize that, everything changes. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, I want you to know you're not alone. Whether you're a wife, a mother, a daughter, or just a human being trying to hold yourself together in a world that constantly asks for more, you are not a placeholder. You are a whole, worthy person. And no one has the right to silence your truth. If you related to anything in this story, comment below, tell your story, or just leave a heart if you're not ready to speak, but you're ready to be heard. If this video meant something to you, please like it. Now it helps more women see it, women who might really need it right now. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that walking away isn't weakness, it's power. And if you want more stories that are raw, real, and rooted in reclaiming your voice, subscribe to this channel. There's more to come, and your presence means more than you know. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay brave, stay grounded, and remember, your silence doesn't protect you. Your truth does.